We're talking about mental health. We have the amazing Clarissa, who's going to be guiding us into her thoughts and her giving us some tips on how we can basically manage our daily mental health and kind of get better. So let's get started.
Let's go.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
And there we are. We're back at it again. I just want to say good morning to everybody. We had such an amazing conversation backstage that I'm like, oh my God, we should have went live maybe like 10, 15 minutes ago,
It happens all the time.
It kind of happens there. So want to say good morning, Clarissa. Thank you so much for coming out this morning. Can you just get into it? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and let's have some fun.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week. My name is Clarissa Paige, and I am a mental health coach, a clinical consulting hypnotherapist, and a HeartMath interventions practitioner. Now, that's a mouthful, but basically what it means is that my purpose here is to support people's mental health. Okay, so what I do is I work with the Aurora Tigers, OJHL hockey team. They're a professional league down in Aurora in the GTA. And I work with them in supporting them through hockey and performance, but also there's so much more than just hockey players, right? There's so much more to our identities than just one thing, right? Everybody here is not just a podcast host. You're so much more than that. So when it comes to the hockey players, I do support them in their personal lives as well, things that they might be going through, experiencing. A lot of them are in school. A lot of them have relationships, family struggles, and they all need support through that. So I give them tools, tips, and tricks on how to manage that. And then when it comes to being a hypnotherapist and HeartMath practitioner, those are just two different modalities that I use in my one-on-one clients. So I'll see clients. I've got 3 different office spaces, and I'll see them there. And we really just say, hey, where do you want to go? I see that you have been having these challenges and you want to be over here feeling healthier, happier, whether it's physically, mentally, even spiritually. Sometimes you want to be feeling better. How are we going to take you there? And so hypnosis and HeartMath is the way that I bring them into that new mental health space.
Nice.
Have you ever read the book Hockey Tough?
I have not read the book, but I've heard about it, that it's
You
good.
got to get that book. Yeah, it is a great book. It pretty much summed up everything you talked about the girls' hockey. I mean, it is insane how they talk to you about, picturing yourself as an animal, and like most of them are tigers or leopards, and it really, really cool book, and just kind of gives you a different insight into the mental toughness in hockey.
It's phenomenal. Their toughness blows me away. They will be on the ice, say a puck hits them in the wrist, their wrist is swollen. They keep playing because they have no idea, right? Their minds are way more tough than their physical bodies, although their bodies are tough as well, right? But when the mind is distracted, the body just follows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, goes from there. And one thing that I really like that when I talk to you about is like where you want to go instead of like where you've been, right? Because I feel like even when it comes like to therapy and things like that, you kind of focus on the past, but you've got to have like the end goal in mind. And I think that's what's important. And where does it come from where your mind is, it balances basically your subconscious or your conscious itself? What do you think about like the mind itself to kind of push through mental health?
Yeah, I think that the mind is the most incredible tool that we have. I do a little dance between which is more close to me, the heart or the mind, but I definitely think that the mind is incredible. It is capable of so much. There's books. Joe Dispenza talks about us being superhuman if we use our mind to the capabilities that it actually has. A computer has a CPU. It has a limit. Our mind does not have a limit. There is no maximum ability to what we can do with our brain. And so it's learning how to use that to our benefit. And then how do we learn? We learn through understanding how it works at first. Now, science does not even fully understand how it works. So all that we can do is really understand what science knows now and how we feel and how we process information. The basics of this is coming down to our subconscious versus our conscious mind, right? Our subconscious, I like to call it the filing cabinet of our mind. It holds everything that's ever happened in our entire life. If you want and you think deep enough and hard enough in a more hypnotic state, you can remember what you had for breakfast July 4th, 1994. Okay, because everything is stored in there. That would be pretty challenging to get to, but it's possible, I promise. All right. So the subconscious holds all of this, and it also drives 90% of our behavior. So let's say when we were a child, we experienced a relatively difficult childhood where we just didn't feel safe or we didn't feel loved. Well, that becomes our belief system. And then as we move through this life, when our conscious mind is offline, when we're not focused consciously and intentionally on what we're doing, say right now, we're using our conscious minds to operate. But if I was to just start talking, or let's say a good example of the subconscious is when we're driving down the street and we drive 10 blocks and we don't remember the 10 blocks. That was our subconscious driving the car. Okay. So if we have all of these behaviors and belief systems in our subconscious and our conscious mind goes offline, well, that happens 90% of the time, and that starts driving our behavior. So the subconscious needs to be cleaned up a lot of the time because most of us have experienced some hardships in our life, especially through childhood, that are driving us today, and we don't even realize it.
So how do you delete those unwanted files? How do you get to that point in your life where you want to eliminate all those issues to get more focused on the goal or objective that's in front of you?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's about deleting them because we're never going to forget that certain things happened. Now, we can also take this down the route of thinking about false memories, which is why I take a very future-focused approach in my clinical work, because there are things as false memories. But deleting our experiences isn't necessarily the process. It's more so saying, I understand that this happened, giving it forgiveness, giving ourselves forgiveness, and returning to a place of self-love, of understanding, compassion, and acceptance. I talk a lot in my clinical work about the inner child, because that's where a lot of our pain is held. That's where a lot of our coping mechanisms are formed. And so if we go in and we give that inner child love, acceptance, understanding, even just visualizing ourselves giving that inner child a hug, it creates a huge, drastic amount of improvement. And now, like you mentioned, Ryan, I don't take a past approach to things. We look at where we're going. Inner child does sound like it's a past-focused approach, but we're not saying to the inner child, hey, do you remember when this happened? We're just saying, I feel you in there. I know that you've had these experiences, and I know that you need to feel better in order to join me in this life that I've created, this happy, healthy, safe life. Why don't you join me up here, and then we can move forward together?
My mind's blown. It's awesome to kind of
Makes
thing, and
sense,
just
though.
another player. It reminds me a lot of like the Untethered Soul. That book has been a great help in our lives, my wife and I's lives, and just coming into for sales, because we know that sales, as all of us here we talk about, it's a results driven industry, right? You have to you get hired, you have to make results. What have you kind of learned in your experience dealing with like people in our profession in terms of sales?
Yeah, so sales, entrepreneurs, professionals as a whole, 72% of them have mental health challenges. That was a study done by the University of California recently. 72% mental health challenges, and that is a huge number. That's
Huge.
massive, right?
That is massive.
Yeah. And so if you've got 72% of business professionals out there with mental health challenges trying to earn a living, what you've got incredible cortisol levels, a huge amount of stress, internal pain, and things that aren't operating the way that they could be. Our potential is limited. Right? And so the way that I see this is it's all about bringing it back to the self, bringing it back to saying, what do I need right now? How am I going about my day that's not in alignment with how I want to feel? I know that I want to experience this happiness, this wholesome. I want my life to be full of hope and joy, positivity, but my actions are not in alignment with where I want to go. And then we go back and we reflect and we say, well, these are some changes that I might need to make. And most of the time, those changes come down to, I just need to give myself back some of the energy that I've been giving outwards for so long.
Hmm.
This is amazing to think about. And
Silence.
no, it's amazing to think about. It's amazing. And
Wow.
Chris, yeah, just wow. And Chris, I want to ask you, like, when it comes to sales, what are your kind of thoughts on like professional detachment? Because in our industry, being an entrepreneur, being a professional, anything like that, we're kind of glued to our cell phones. We're glued to our computers. We consume a lot of content. What are kind of like, I want to get your thoughts on basically professional detachment.
Yeah, shutting down, very important. Before this career of mine, I was also a professional. I was working as a consultant for a franchise company, 2 of them. And you've got 2 cell phones going, you've got your laptop at home, your mind's racing about your to-do list for tomorrow, the next day. You've got your productivity calendars open, plastered on your walls. It's this whole lifestyle that ends up just taking over. We talk about self-identity, right? And so there's this idea that, well, I'm only identifying with this one side of myself.
True.
And that's not the case. There's so many different sides of yourself that you need to make time for all of them.
Indeed.
Right? So we're not all just entrepreneurs or professionals or podcast hosts. We're brothers, we're daughters, sons, siblings. We have friendships. But most important, we are an individual person that also requires attention from ourselves. And so detaching from this idea that I'm only an entrepreneur or I'm only a salesperson and getting back into, well, who am I really and truly outside of that is key, very key, because when we do that, we're able to actually prioritize ourselves. I like to talk about the idea of being high pot or low pot, where we think of our torso as almost like a pot of soup, right? And so if we have this pot of soup here and it's low, that means that we're feeling low. That pot of soup and all of the internal makings of that soup, all of the ingredients represent the energy levels that we have. So if we have a low pot, we don't actually have enough soup to feed other people. But if we start putting all the ingredients back in our pot and filling it up, it starts overflowing. And we have enough soup to give to everybody else, to give to our job, to give to our family, our children, whoever falls in line with that, pets even, right? But the key is giving ourselves the ingredients that build our energy back up, that fill our pot so we can feed other people. Disconnecting is really important and to be able to do that, to be able to actually feed our pot again, to fill it back up. So the question is, what ingredients do you need to feel better, to fill your pot? And it's different for everyone.
Would you say the first, one of the first ingredients would be a conscious decision to do that? Because I see a lot of, especially salespeople, their career, their monthly income becomes their identity. And I can tell you, when I first started, that's what it was. Like, I had no friends outside of the company I worked for. My entire identity was in line with that company and what I did and how good my month was. And when I moved provinces, it was a huge shock to the system. Like, you think you have all these friends and it's like, holy crap, I've got nobody. Like, literally my phone bill one month was like $465 and I had 2 incoming calls and they were my mom. And you kind of sit back and you go like, holy crap, my entire identity was tied up with this company and these people. And that was a conscious shift to say, okay, I'm not that, I'm me. that has, and then, you start meeting friends and kind of create a new life. But there's a conscious aspect of it because, like you said, we've all jumped in our car from work and all of a sudden pulled in the driveway and went, how do we get here? Like,
Yeah.
I don't remember the traffic. I don't remember the turns. I don't remember the street lights, nothing. So would you say there would be a conscious aspect of it that starts that process?
Absolutely. There is the conscious aspect. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to that conscious aspect, most of us don't make that choice until we're forced to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Until we've reached our lowest point, until we've reached full, complete experiences of burnout. Even more so than burnout, we can get deep into depression or anxiety. We can start being diagnosed with things. We're on medication. And at that point, a lot of the times people say, okay, I'm done with this. I really just want to feel better. And now I'm ready to move forward. Sometimes you find the person that is able to recognize the down or the decline before they reach the bottom. And they say, okay, it's time for me to make some changes now. And then the conscious decision comes into play. But most of the time it comes at the very, very bottom.
Clarissa, I've got a quick question for you. For all the new entrepreneurs out there, it's a stressful time in their lives where they go from corporate to entrepreneurship. What is the best way for them to attack that new role and still be mentally fit, both business-wise and on the personal level? Because like Dan was saying, when he was in corporate, his focus was on his business. He wanted to be the best that he possibly could, and everything else was kind of blank. So when a person is forced into either feast or famine, you have to work pretty hard to get to where you need to be. How do you differentiate yourself from that business life to the personal and still meet your goals and objectives?
Yeah. So think about the idea of fight or flight mode, how our brain works. When we go, let me back up a little bit. We've got a nervous system in our body. This nervous system is we have the sympathetic side or the parasympathetic side. The sympathetic side of our nervous system is when fight or flight mode is initiated. Okay. This is initiated when we feel stress, panic, anxiety, when we're thinking about things in the future that might be worrying us. For example, a new entrepreneur saying, well, how am I going to feed my family? Then they go into that stressed out state. And when we're in that stressed out state, our cortisol levels increase, the blood leaves our prefrontal cortex, we're not able to think, we experience brain fog, our digestion stops, our body essentially stops functioning because our only priority is survival. Okay, so the only thing that's on are survival instincts. And so when we think about that, we think about the fact that, well, if I'm only operating on my survival instincts, how efficient and effective am I actually going to be in my business? You might be really good at working in that mode, but imagine how good you could be if you were training your system to exist in a way that was more on the parasympathetic side, the calm, relaxed side. That's when everything's flowing. When we have access to these creative thoughts, we have access to every single thing in our body that we could utilize to create a good company, business, profit, however you want to look at that. And so as an entrepreneur starting out, I know when I started my business, and I'm a little bit biased on this, but it was about, well, I need to take care of my mind, because if I'm not taking care of my mind, my business is not going to be as good as it could be. Right? So it's, morning routines are really important for being able to shift into that healthier mindset. Everybody has their own morning routine, but I know that doing something that fulfills your body and your mind every morning will bring you through a day at a less stressed out pace, will allow your brain to work, will clear any fog, and you'll be in a very high energy place to be able to move through your day. You might experience stress in the moment, but you'll be at a better overall state to be able to bring yourself back down to center when needed.
I love that you said that, because Jeff and I We talked about the 5 to 9, getting your morning routine out, and whether it be a workout or walking with your dogs. And I kind of saw on your social medias you've been doing like cold plunges in the morning, right? And it's something that definitely works, right? And I kind of want to ask you a question, because last Thursday, Jeff and I, we spoke about quiet quitting, and that is kind of going on. What can leaders do? What can managers do to basically create a space, a safe space for sales reps themselves?
Yeah, so management is really important. I think there was a very I talk about things in terms of masculine and feminine energy, and how we all have masculine and feminine energy inside of us. But in the sales world and the business world, it was very dominated by this masculine hard energy. Both have a place, right? The soft nurturing side and the more motivated side, they both have a place. But being hard on the team in order to receive results is not going to get the results. What actually happens is, if we say, let's say we have a sales rep and they're just not meeting their numbers, and you go and you tell them that they're not doing well, they should be doing better, and angry at them, however those words come across. I don't want to be overly abrupt when I say certain words. So let's say that they just take a really aggressive approach. What it's doing is it's actually triggering all of the belief systems that that person already has from childhood, right? The biggest belief system out there, most of us have this: I'm not good enough. And so if you go and trigger that I'm not good enough in your sales rep, well, what's happening is that inner child, their inner world is saying, hey, look, there's another reason that I'm not good enough. And then we watch the dopamine levels decrease drastically.
It's like the old thing, reverse psychology, right?
Yeah.
You kind of use that in order to motivate them instead of demotivate them, by saying the things that they want to hear in order to get them to rise to that occasion, rather than telling them the opposite.
Absolutely.
Well, and also you don't want to plant seeds of doubt, right? Because if they weren't thinking it and then you plant it, they're going to start thinking it right away.
Absolutely.
Lisa's got a, I don't know if I hit the right one. Oh yeah, freeze or fauna as well. But Lisa's got a great question. What are some of the ingredients what are some of the ways to determine the ingredients in your soup?
That's a good question, Lisa. So determining our ingredients, it's a matter of saying, well, what feels good? And this is a question that I ask a lot of people, and they don't know. And the reason is because they've never taken time to figure it out, right? So there's a couple really common things that are ingredients that everybody needs, which I'll talk about the 3: sleep, exercise, and healthy eating. Those are some serious ingredients that, as you take on those 3, will really boost how you feel, will be a really great boost to that pot of soup. Okay. Sleeping is incredibly important. Sleep regulates every function in our body. So if you're not sleeping well, you're not showing up to your days as well as you could be, right? And you might think, I'm showing up really well, but imagine how good you could be showing up if you were having a good night's sleep. And then we get into this idea of the circadian rhythm, getting in tune with the nightfall. Ryan and I were talking about this before we started recording, but we have a circadian rhythm, right? Our body is connected to the rise and fall of the sun. So as it gets dark out, our body starts producing melatonin, which tells our mind it's time for sleep. It's time to go to bed, which is why some of you might be experiencing a little bit more sleepiness earlier in the day with this daylight savings time happening. Okay. But let's say it's nighttime, we've started producing melatonin, and then we go and we turn all the lights on in our house, and we turn on all the TVs, and we've got our phone screens super bright. Well, it's actually shutting off that production. And then it's harder for us to sleep. So it's getting in tune with these cycles. It's getting into this place of saying, yeah, I really do want to sleep well, and I'm going to do what I need to do to get there. Okay. Drink a nice cozy tea at night, have a bath, read a book, make it a peaceful time, because you're going from this alert but peaceful state into a restful and peaceful state, and it will impact sleep wholeheartedly. Okay. Then there's exercise, saying, hey, how am I moving my body? Am I moving my body, or is the biggest movement that I'm getting walking around pacing in panic and stress through my house? Okay. Am I walking my dogs? Is that enough? Do I need to be moving my body? I think getting to the gym, yoga, doing any sort of physical activity that gets that energy moving through your body is really, really helpful. And then we look at what we're eating. And that's a huge topic that I could talk about for hours and hours and hours, and I will not do that. But look, just being honest, leveling with yourself, looking at your diet and saying, hey, is what I'm eating in alignment with this healthy, happy person that I want to be? Right? If we're eating McDonald's every day, probably not. It's probably not making that pot of soup feel any good.
It's making the pot belly go good, but not the pot of soup.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Instead of growing up, you're growing out. Yeah. Yeah.
I think those are amazing things. And I love what you said, because especially with the night routines, we have a habit. We used to do this, is like before we go to bed, we turn on the news, but then you bring that negative energy, whether it be war or something happened in the city or something like that on CB24. So it's kind of like surrounding yourself. I'd love to get your thoughts, Clarissa, on social media consumption, because I think it's a big thing that you've probably seen it with your work with the Aurora Tigers. They're younger gentlemen as well. But what are your thoughts on social media consumption?
I think social media consumption is probably the most negative thing that's happened to this world. Everyone has access 24/7. And so this idea of personal time and shutting off has gone out the window, right? I know for myself, I went through a period where I was known as the person that would respond right away. I always had my phone on me. If somebody messaged me, I was right there within a minute responding to them. And that is a weight on the shoulders. Even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment, even if you like being that person that's always there and accessible, it's a huge stress. Why? Because you're taking a ladle of soup every time you do that and you're dumping it out. You're giving it away. So
have you seen that movie, The Social, on Netflix? It's all about social media, and it's kind of comes from the engine inside, where they're saying, oh, no, okay, he's off. Show him a picture of his ex-girlfriend with his new boyfriend. And then all of a sudden he's back on social media. Like it's how they, the social experiment. If somebody out there will have seen it, it's on Netflix. And it is crazy when you're watching this, because you're like, well, he hasn't been on for like 45 minutes to an hour. Show him something or ping him or send him a push notification that's going to bring him back. And it's like all of a sudden, and then he's back on his device. And you go anywhere now, and you just look around. Like even if you go to like the license bureau, and you look around, and there's nobody looking up. Yep. No one. Everyone's in their phones.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an addiction. What we've got going on here is full-blown addiction. Every time we look at our phone, we tap the screen, we turn it on, we see that, oh, someone's made contact. Oh, I got a like. What that's doing is it's driving all of our happy hormones up, our motivating hormones, dopamine. And we're saying, oh, I'd like some more of that. I'd like some more of that. It's actually the equivalent to a heroin addiction. Wow. Except everyone has it.
Yeah, I could actually see that, because if you go to take somebody's phone away from them, they like,
yeah,
they start like, come on, man, give me, man, I'll give you $2. I'll give you $2. Like Pookie in New Jack City. It's bad. It's bad.
It's absolutely bad. And I think, there's limiting your time on social media, but then there's also, what am I consuming on social media, right? I recently went through all of the things that I was following, because we've had social media for like a decade now, longer even. And some of the things that I followed back when I was like 18 years old are not in alignment with who I am today. Yeah. But it was still feeding my brain, right? And then we can get into this idea of the subconscious. So when you're scrolling through your phone, it's actually hypnosis. You have hypnotized yourself. Okay. You're scrolling through, you're really focused on one thing, and you're not paying attention to anything else in the room. that's considered hypnosis. It's really just this state of extreme focus. And when that happens, you're highly suggestible. You're very suggestible. You're open to any ideas as long as they're morally in alignment with yourself. You'd be open to any ideas. So essentially, as we get into that hypnotic state, we're training our subconscious with anything that we see on that screen, right? This is how things such as mass formation happen, mass hypnosis. Okay. One piece of information goes to everybody because they've all been hypnotized on their screen. All right. So it's a really interesting little way of doing things. But if you're looking at things that aren't in alignment with who you want to be, where you want to go, and you're stuck in the past, looking at things that are old, outdated, negative, depressing, you're just feeding that into your subconscious. And it's just saying, okay, well, this is how we're going to be going forward. So it's having that awareness of what I'm looking at on social media as well.
It's great suggestion.
It's great to think about because like even myself, like I was thinking about, I saw like headlines of what's going on with Kanye West and Adidas and all this stuff. And it's like, why do I care about that stuff? You know, it has nothing to do with me. Like I don't care about Yeezys. That doesn't benefit my life, right? So I like that you did that. When it comes to like burnout, what kind of like preventative action do you think someone can take? Because you said that when they're at their lowest, that's when they're kind of seek help. But when they're kind of seeing the signs of burnout, what kind of actions can someone kind of take?
Yeah. So it's always coming back to ourself. It's always taking a moment to just be alone, to get in tune with what our needs are. And this also comes back to determining our own ingredients, right? What are things that lift you up, that bring you happiness, that are not, in alignment with the work that you're doing that's causing burnout, that are more in alignment with you outside of that. So some people like to dance, put on some music, dance around, right? But feeling when that's happening, feeling when you're getting low, and putting those preventative measures in place beforehand. Dancing around, going for a walk, going for a drive. Some people like to do that with the windows open. I have a client that likes to go for a drive with his windows open and his cat. And they just hang out and they drive around and he feels better. And that's great, right? So remove yourself from the situation that's causing burnout and do things that bring you joy. Crafting is another great way. Reading, go to the gym, do your meal prep for the week, whatever fills that pot up. But notice it as you're coming down and say, all right, this is time. People also like to, and I recommend this to a lot of my clients who are more like A-minded, type A personality, where they like to have everything scheduled. So it's in your calendar every day, scheduling something for yourself that is in relation to filling up my pot. Right? So let's say every day I'm going to spend 10 minutes meditating. And meditation is the top way that you can improve mental health very quickly. A lot of people like to say, I can't meditate. My thoughts are racing all over the place. And I say, well, that's the point, right? It's training our mind to come back into center, clearing all of those thoughts. So, getting into a routine, scheduling it in your calendar, making sure that you are taking care of yourself. Because the more you take care of yourself, the more you can give to everything else around you.
That's this. I feel like I'm going to be booking a session now once we get off here to talk to myself because this has been the most impactful episode for me personally.
I was about to say that definitely.
As a joke to Dan and Jeff, from what Clarissa said, I guess we need to hit up the shipping managers when they're scrolling because that's when they're hypnotized, right? So, they'll be open up to.
You actually started my brain going and figuring out, okay, how do we put an ad on Facebook for all the traffic?
Hey, are you scrolling?
Hey, are you scrolling right now?
Yeah,
you got 3 minutes in your day.
That's an open door opportunity.
Would you like to scroll for 2 hours a day? Call us.
Exactly. That's awesome. Clarissa, I want to thank you so much for coming out this morning. Can you tell the audience and tell ourselves as well, how can people reach you outside of this?
Absolutely. So my business name is Simcoe Hypnosis. I'm located up in Barrie, Ontario, and I've got a couple offices there. So you can reach me on my website, simcoehypnosis.com. You can also reach me on social media at Simcoe Hypnosis on Instagram and Facebook. I do have a TikTok that's up and coming. It's the Clarissa Paige. That's me. So you can reach me out on there as well. All of my sessions I will do either in person at one of my offices or virtually. We can also just have a phone call. Anytime anyone needs to chat, just reach out. I am always available.
That's awesome. That movie, Clarissa, was Social Dilemma.
Amazing. Yeah, I saw that advertised there on Netflix.
Yeah. If anyone who hasn't seen it, it's a must watch because it will open your eyes to a lot of this. It's crazy, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Put the phones down.
Put the phone down, sure. So I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning. We would definitely be hitting the replay at 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Oh my gosh, I apologize, Ryan. I never set up the replays yesterday, and it was a killer show with Dean. So I apologize. Actually, I realized.
You see what happens when I'm not on the episode, you know? See what happens
the day before, you didn't put it on Buzzsprout. You just set up the replays with Langstaff. So we got two of us here.
From there.
Yeah. Not that I'm paying attention or anything.
Join us on Friday for wins and lessons. So I guess Dan's lesson for me is going to be to upload Buzzsprout on his own.
My lesson is going to be learn how to do that.
My win is right now. This was a great show. Absolutely win.
Great show.
Happy to hear it. Happy to share any information. So if you have questions, just reach out. Totally.
All right, with that, let's go.
Centurion Trucking. Our motto is people before profit. Today's market requires more transparency, consistency, and focus on what our clients need to win. Centurion Trucking and American Logistics are poised to help their clients achieve and surpass their targets. If you're looking for a team that honors your needs, dreams, and aspirations, then get a hold of Daman at American Logistics or Centurion Trucking